This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Care Notes with Doug Wilber. And Doug, you said you just came back from a meeting with other caregivers or caregiver companies?
Yeah, it was caregiver companies. I was privileged to be able to go to the Home Care Association of America meeting that is held annually. It was held this time in Chicago, Illinois. So it was actually easy to get to for me. And it's fascinating because it was by far the largest meeting, I believe, that they ever had more vendors that were there than any time that I had ever seen. So people selling to different items or services more than even items to the Home Care Association agencies. And there's a lot of educational pieces that were involved in this whole process of when we were there, and so I was able to get some great lectures in to be able to understand trends and issues and things happening, and so it was a good meeting. It's also I've been involved in Home Care Association for a number of years. As I've mentioned before, I'm vice chair of the Ohio chapter. So I actually went in prior to the actual annual meeting for a pre-meeting. And in the pre-meeting, we were talking about legislation, things going on, from a national and from a local perspective. And it's pretty fascinating. So, there was many levels that I ended up being able to gain insight and understanding of. So, that's part of what I'd like to do today, hopefully, is share some of those insights and be able to hopefully give people a sense of what it was like, not so much to be there, but to get a glimpse of some of the things that I received while I was there. So, one thing I did want to mention, because they did emphasize this, that there is a bipartisan bill, and that's pretty rare right now to have something that has a large bipartisan support, that is out there for the VA benefits. And it's called the, I think it's the Elizabeth Dole Act is the proper name for it. And essentially what it says is that if someone is in the care system, they're paying people for the VA. They're paying people differently, or reimbursing or paying for services differently if you're in the home setting than you are in a facility setting. And so essentially what this is trying to do is bring parity, so that the amount of money that you could receive for staying at home, or not, money isn't the right thing, the amount of services that they'll pay for. So that quantity of money, they feel like should be equal for home care as to facility care. And to me, that makes perfect sense, because what's happening now is people are getting to a certain amount of care, and if they don't have a lot of money, what'll happen is they'll just say, okay, you hit your limit, and whatever that percentage limit is that is lower than in the facility, we're just gonna, we'll pay for it, but you have to go into a facility now for us to pay for these other things. And all this is saying is, you know what? We'll continue paying as much at home, as you would have, so you can get more services and hopefully stay home and
Right.
not go into a facility. So I do urge people to, if you agree with this, and I think most people should agree with that. I don't think there's a lot of like reasons why someone shouldn't. But if you agree with that, please, contact your congressman, your senators, and just say, hey, I support this
Sure.
bill. I think this is a good thing. I think we should be doing that. So that was like one thing that I took away, that I think the audience would benefit by knowing that that is out there. It is something that I think we should wholeheartedly support, because my vision in starting the company was the belief that most people will do better at home than they will in a facility.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so if we can do that, we should do that. As a people and for our veterans.
And don't
Um,
you think that if this does get passed for our veterans, eventually, I think we're going to look at it as saying, it's not just for the veterans. We now have to think about anyone who needs care, because, what I have seen, and it's not for a particular facility, but I've seen when people, can't afford being at home anymore and they go into a facility, the confusion, their attitude changes, and oftentimes they get worse once they're in the facility, even though the
right.
facility is servicing them.
Yeah. Well, here's one of them, and this is a thought, and it really is a thought, and I'll honestly say I haven't spent a lot of time contemplating all the pieces, because we have a problem in our country, and that is we're spending more than we're taking in.
Right.
And so we are not going to explore the solution to that, but I know that that's unsustainable long term, because all we're going to do is throw debt onto the next generation if we do that too much. And I don't think anyone really thinks that's right or fair.
Right.
I think we would just rather pretend that that wasn't the reality and keep on spending. But like we do with, if you end up getting into too much credit card debt,
Right. Yep.
it ends up being like, okay, eventually something's going to happen
Right.
if you keep on doing that. So without tackling that issue, I will say this is that the way the system now currently works is, for the most part, Medicaid it doesn't kick in until you've spent down all of your money,
Right.
which is, I understand that, because that means before you straddle someone else with paying a bill, you should use your resources.
Right.
You save for a rainy day, it's raining. Now it's time to spend it down. When that money, though, is gone, the tendency is for someone to get pushed into the system with Medicaid in a nursing home, because they'll take care of everything.
Right.
It also is, easier to get into a nursing home, I think, than for most people to get care in the home. And I think, again, we have to think about parity in that situation. Like, how can we really effectively pay for folks in the home setting versus, having them have as their kind of the de facto option going into a facility in long-term nursing.
Sure.
Um, and I do think we have to think through those pieces pretty thoroughly, because and And hopefully that would just be like, you can use your dollars this way, or you can use your dollars this way, but you're still going to be using the same amount of dollars. And that's why, again, I like the Elizabeth Dole Act, because it's taking into account that, spending money either way, why not do it this way?
Right.
Um, and I think one of the problems with that last bill, just so you know, they had a lot more people kind of, I think, support and jump on it, but the Congressional Budget Office, from what I understand, originally scored it, and all bills get a score on like how costly this is going to be. And it sounds like they did the calculations wrong initially, so it seemed like it was going to cost a lot more. Someone caught it and said, wait a second, those numbers don't seem right. And usually the Congressional Budget Office is actually really good at predicting things. And then, I think they typically follow a nice bipartisan path, so they're not
Sure.
pushing one way or another based on, trying to skew the results. But anyway, in this case, it was just they accidentally did the wrong calculations, and they went back and refigured it, and they found out that those original figures were wrong. So a lot more people were then willing to say, oh, if it's not going to really cost more or not much more, then we're going to in that situation support this bill.
Absolutely.
So yeah. But so those are kind of a couple things. Also was seeing, that different states, getting back to the Medicaid, and we don't, as a company, take Medicaid or waiver. But one of the reasons is in the state of Ohio, reimbursement is horrible. So we don't feel like we could take that and use that in such a way that we would be able to have good caregivers. And but because the reimbursement is so poor, that essentially the only way I can figure out that you could do it would be if you end up paying your people minimum wage, and you're not going to either do your workers, any service by doing that, or you're not going to get good people, so you're not going to do whoever you're serving, any benefit in that. So, that was kind of the legislative piece. From the trends, one of the things that I love to do is I love to go through the labyrinth of vendors that were there, just to see what's there, because oftentimes that reflects other things.
Sure.
And like trends or mega trends or something like that. And so there was more vendors there than there had ever been. It was pretty amazing. And in this particular situation, one of the things that I ended up realizing was, people are catching on to AI. And there was a lot of talk in the meetings about AI. And I'm a really big believer in AI having a lot of potential for so much for the elderly, making us more efficient as a company in doing what we do. I also believe that it will help us, with things like discovering, or having like smart technology in the home, so that if people were to, fall, being able to detect the fall, just because, and there's starting to be companies that are doing that. They're listening, basically have a sensor that's out there that kind of listens and say, is this the normal sounds that we hear at 9 in the morning? And picking up on patterns And so it actually sits there quietly for a period of time, listening and listening and listening and listening for patterns. And then it after it like says, I think I understand this person and their patterns, then it starts doing, like more active things. Well, like, hey, someone is supposed to be getting up and they're not making the getting up noises. You're not hearing things rustle or whatever. It will listen for falls. It'll listen for many, many other things that are just indicators. And I thought that's great. That's
Absolutely.
yeah. And I think for the elderly, as we're weighing through aging in place in the future, it's not going to be just one piece. It may not be just an aid there 24 hours. It's probably going to be some combination of smart technologies using AI or machine learning and incorporating that with the human touch and helping people, with that human piece and hopefully bringing costs overall down for folks. And I believe strongly that it's going to be that combination of doing really, lots of things
Sure.
in a smart way that's going to make a difference. And so I do think companies, and hopefully companies like ours, will remain on the cutting edge of things, so that as we see technology that we can sort of pair our services with, we'll do that. And I think families will also be doing that. So I don't know if you have heard about any of those things or not.
I haven't, but if you think about, having the nanny cams in the homes of many seniors, some
Right.
people say, oh, that's terrible. You're watching them. Well, we're watching them, but we're also trying to keep them comfortable and, let them live alone if that's what they choose to do.
Right.
So if AI is used properly, which it sounds like that's the technology that they're building, I think it's wonderful because,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, as I keep telling my boys, you're not putting me in a home. And they laugh at me and it's like, oh yeah, you're going to take orders from us when you get older. And it's like, well, I just may have to. But um, but if this technology, continues, it's going to give us all a better chance of living a better life,
Right. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
love
The other thing that I saw was more and more about the trends of caregiver shortage. We got a taste of that with what was going on when we were going through COVID.
her.
And that was really a precursor of things to come, in the sense that I believe that we're going to be moving into a time where the caregiver shortages are going to be extremely severe. And all you have to do is look at the statistics, like how many kids are being born compared to to families right now. And I think if I remember right, the ratio is about 1.7 um, per woman of children being born. Well, that means that we're not sustaining our population, not
Sure.
that way. So we got to figure that out, because if we don't reproduce at least equal, we're not only gonna I mean, with reproducing equally, I think we would still have big shortages just because of population and where things are in the population. But I also believe um, that we have a real big problem, that is going to happen with that 1.7 number, where we're just not going to have caregivers. And so that's why that technology piece actually does play a really big role overall in what we're doing. So,
And you stop and think about how many young people today are actually choosing to be single. Okay.
right.
And so that changes even the caregiving. You don't have the spouse or the children to come in and take care of you. In fact, I had lunch with a friend of mine today, and she was telling me how sick she was a couple months ago with COVID.
Yeah.
And it's like, she lives by herself. She's got family around, but they couldn't come near. And so she said, sometimes they left food by the door, but she was too sick to get up to even
To
go
get
get
it. Yeah.
And so, that's something else that, AI is going to help us with.
Right. Well, and that actually, I just talked to someone who fell and she had COVID, and she's in her late 90s, and she ended up when she fell, it took her hours to crawl to a phone. She was so fortunate that she was around, but she was so weak in that point. In her case, she doesn't have any family in the area. So now, she has a very supportive family. They just don't happen to be in the area.
Right.
And the point of that is that, one of the other mega trends is people don't live near their parents.
Right.
I know you didn't live near your
Right.
mom. And, and that was just, people moved to other towns. And so more and more you're having parents that are kind of orphaned in their
Right.
cities. And frankly, the parents want to remain in their cities. They don't want
Right.
to move to, if their daughter's out in Topeka, they don't want to move to Topeka. They want to stay in Cleveland where they
Right.
built their life and have their home and other things. The other trend that I saw that I thought was interesting was that there was a big emphasis on consolidation, and that more and more companies like ours are expanding and getting more and more companies,
Sure.
that
Right.
they're doing. So I think the trend over the next 10 years is going to be that there are going to be fewer companies doing what we do. They're just going to be bigger. And that's not necessarily bad. As a matter of fact, I think that there's some good in that. What I worry about a little bit is, if there's if it becomes too corporate,
Yep.
where it becomes all about the profit rather than the care as being the driving. Now you have to, as a company, even if you're a nonprofit, you have to be profitable.
Right.
In
Exactly.
the sense that
Yeah.
you have to take in more money than you spend.
Right.
So for that reason, though, it's really important that your vision, your values, your other things drive what you're doing, so that it still remains about care and is not about just being in a profit-making machine.
Sure. Well, and we've seen with a lot of the facilities how they've been bought out by big corporations.
Yeah.
And the way they the way they provided care previously is totally different than the way they're doing it now. And I've seen that with a couple places just here in the area. And it's, to me, it's very upsetting because, this facility had a great reputation and now they're hiring differently because it's from up top rather than
Right.
from within.
Yeah. So I do think that we as an industry, and one of the things that I'm committed to is that we don't miss, that as we grow, as we expand, I want to do what I have always called as a care model, which is care is at the center of what we do. That is our focus. And we have a good business model, so we will remain profitable and viable is probably even a better word into the future so that we can continue on with the mission of care and doing the right things for others. So, as we expand, one of the things that I was, greatly had, kind of double my resolve that we as a company will not lose sight on the very purpose of what we do. And I believe that in the end, that's the right thing for the um, our clients. But I also believe that hopefully we can be a bit of we can call out to the industry as a whole and say, we're leading the way, follow what we're
Exactly.
doing,
Yep.
and don't forget this piece of it, as it becomes bigger and potentially a little bit more corporate. Um, the one thing that's good about it, have you ever noticed that hospital systems tend to like be in certain areas? So you have the Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals, and they're strong in an area that is around that metropolitan area. But these national hospital chains tend, when they started coming out and doing it, they thought, well, we can just do here like we do here, like we do here. Well, it never was successful in doing
Right.
that. All right, or not very successful, or else the whole country would be like that. But I do believe that what ended up happening, that's a picture that because what I'm seeing in like as a trend nationally is that what we do is very local. So Cleveland is very different from from Nashville, Tennessee.
Sure.
And if we tried to do in Nashville, Tennessee, things exactly what they like we do here, and tried to set up shop in that way, it's not going to work.
Well, we got to take into consideration the culture of the people and the culture of
Yeah,
the area. Um, I was just surprised, and we've talked about this before, how different the caregiving in Michigan was. And it wasn't that we worked with one company, we worked with a multitude of companies. And it was
yeah,
like, how can it be this different? And you're explaining it a little bit now, and I'm starting to understand too that it's based on what the area expects or needs.
right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, care is very local, in 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 many, many respects. And so, I believe that we're going to be successful as we know that and understand that, the needs, the emphasis, everything is going to be very different depending on that local spot that you're in.
Sure.
And again, you're not going to be able to overly corporatize. What you may be able to do is develop great systems that are adaptable in different areas, and make that happen. So those are just some of the trends that I saw. And that last trend was kind of a trend with a warning, that as just knowing that um, we want things to remain personal in this, but we do want the efficiencies of scale. So there's nothing wrong with scaling. It just is, it has to remain, very, very personal and very care focused. As you're as you're doing whatever you're doing. So I could literally talk for an extra half an hour, but I don't think anyone wants to listen an
Well,
extra half an hour.
I think one of the important things that we all need to keep in mind is that most of us are going to need some sort of care in our future, whether we want to believe it or not. The same person who I had lunch with today had mentioned that her brother-in-law has an illness and his wife works full time. And, you know, I wouldn't consider them seniors. Okay. And when I heard that, I said, how are they dealing with it? And she told me, and it was like, so grateful to hear that he can still be at home and he can, do the things he needs to, and his wife can still work and,
Yeah.
have that life outside of the house. So we have to remember that when we talk about home care can come in at any age. And it's not just because we're old and ill, it's because we just need it in our life. And
Yeah.
that's what you guys provide. So Cherished Companions is number one on my list. And my boys know that. In fact, with all my legal
speed dial to church.
with all my legal papers, I have your name and number, and it's like, if we ever need anything, and they laugh,
All done.
yeah. So I'm planning my future. I want to thank you for sharing with us today, and enjoy Chicago. It's one of my favorite cities. So hopefully you'll get a little bit of fun time while you're there.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.